And we're live. Welcome back to another episode of the Wheelie Podcast. This time, today's episode is sponsored by Momentum, a new brand of lifestyle e-bikes from Giant Group designed to deliver a full range of innovative electric, hybrid, and city bikes with premium features, long assist range, and sensor technologies that offer natural riding experiences that are both energy saving and fun. We'll hear more about them later in the podcast. For now, I'm your host, Mike Atoll. I'm joined again by Electrek's Seth Weintraub. How's it going, Seth?
I'm good.
Awesome. And we have got a pile of interesting stories to talk about again this week, very international. Several of our stories involve testing Pedego's new Moto electric bike. We've got some China stories from their new e-bike battery rules to visiting Ride1Up's factory there and the new tariffs, whether or not they'll apply to e-bikes. We're going to take a look at a huge cargo bike so big it's got 6 wheels. We're revisiting Saunders Metacycle with some new revelations that have come out, and we're going to finish it up with an interesting little electric microcar called the Eli Zero. Where are we going to start it off, though, this week, Seth?
All right. China's sweeping new e-bike battery rules could have a major impact in the US.
So this one is interesting because when we talk about fire concerns with electric bikes, what we're really talking about, the majority of these fires are coming from just really, really cheaply produced Chinese e-bike batteries. Now, we should say that almost all e-bike batteries come from China, so that's not to say that they're cheap because they're made in China, but the cheapest of the batteries are the ones that are causing the majority of these fires. And I think it's always important when we talk about this to discuss the scope as well and remember that, you know, every day millions of e-bikes charge without fires. So this is a very small percentage of e-bikes that have a fire issue, but because the consequences can be lethal, it's important to discuss this. And so with these ultra cheap, just like corner cutting Chinese batteries, the danger is just so many times more fold. And so China has actually announced a new nationwide standard for electric bike batteries, and it's designed to essentially weed out those super low quality corner cutting batteries. It covers I think 22 different areas, so all sorts of things like overcharge, over discharge, temperature, all these different aspects, puncture, all the things that would lead to short circuits and cause fires in batteries. And the reason I find this so interesting is because, first of all, it doesn't cover export batteries. It's only domestic. So the first question is this going to impact the US? But on the bigger picture, I think that even if China is saying, all right, all of the batteries produced locally have to be compliant with these new safety regulations, well, the domestic market's something like 90% of the battery market in China. You know, they've got tens of millions of e-bikes being sold every year. So if they need to sort of swap over all of their factories and production lines to produce batteries that can meet these regulations, then to me, it doesn't seem likely that these factories are going to keep separate lines to create export only batteries when, you know, you're talking like 1 in 20 batteries out of these factories maybe goes to the export market. So even though this is a domestic only regulation, I have to imagine that this is going to cause sort of a trickle down, and international markets are going to benefit from this because it's going to help to weed out those super low quality batteries. Now, I will say that there was a counter argument to this in the comments that I think is fair to address, and it could be that in the short term, a lot of the existing poor quality batteries just get dumped on the export market.
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
Yeah, so it is something to be watching out for. I mean, whenever we talk about this, we always recommend, you know, don't buy those like ridiculously priced batteries. Like if it looks like it's comes wrapped in duct tape or something, it's probably not a good idea. You know, I mean, a good lithium ion battery for an e-bike should cost a few $100s. Like if you're finding a $150 battery, it's probably got some corners cut along the way. So hopefully this is going to be a net good thing. It certainly will in China because, you know, they also have their fair share of battery fires there. But hopefully it's a net good for us as well, because it just means that the world's biggest electric bicycle battery maker is suddenly going to be building much more well-designed, much higher quality batteries. That's the goal. I don't know.
Yeah.
Am I too optimistic here?
No, I mean, in China, certainly, that's going to be beneficial in the long run, and even like probably the short run. Like, I can't imagine that there's that much inventory out there just sitting on shelves. So this should hit pretty quickly. I guess the question though is like, are batteries being built in, Vietnam or Cambodia or India? Um, you know, if the only place to make really cheap batteries is, moves out of China, then all of a sudden maybe maybe corners are going to be cut in other places. So it's not foolproof, and obviously you want to check now, like, or in the near future, if it's made in China, like theoretically it's going to be a little, at least safe. But there's batteries being built all over the world, so I would say what, like 90 something percent are Chinese though.
Oh yeah, I mean they just have such a huge share of the market. They've got the resources, they have the manpower, like
Hmm.
it's all there. But you
Right.
bring up something funny that like after this goes into effect, which I think is November, suddenly made in China is going to be like a good qualifier on a battery. It's like, oh, is that one of those Vietnam ones? No, I want the Chinese
Right.
battery.
No, that's a good point, and that's a good branding exercise too for China.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure they don't want to be associated with all these fires that are happening, so it's just a good move on their part.
For sure. All right, let's move on. Cargo e-bikes have gotten so big. This one has six wheels and can jackknife.
I thought this thing was just so cool when I first saw it. If you're not watching the podcast video with us, I'll do my best to describe it. If you've ever seen those four-wheeled electric cargo bikes that are popular in a lot of like European capitals, this looks like one of those. It's often called a quadricycle, except that it's got kind of like a fifth wheel on the back for attaching semi trailer, very much like a semi truck. And then on the back, there is like the bicycle version of a semi trailer with another two wheels. So this is really like a tractor trailer of the cargo bike world. It's got a huge weight rating of, I think, up to 350 kilos of cargo in the back. That's 770 pounds, I believe, which is a lot for a cargo bike. And that rear trailer is 4 cubic meters. So it's pretty darn big. They do have different trailer options, so they've got smaller ones and flatbeds and tilt trailers, all sorts of things, even a refrigerated trailer. So this is a really cool, not even a concept anymore. They're actually building these. It's called the epac 4. And they're actually starting to build these, though they say that mass production is probably not going to start until 2025. For now, they're probably being sort of built one at a time by this UK company. And I believe they are produced there in England. I'm not sure where exactly this company is located, but these epac 4 cargo bikes just look like one of the best ways to replace a big box truck. It fits in a bicycle lane. It looks like it's probably, I don't know, 3 feet wide or so based on the scale here. I know a lot of people are not super excited about seeing these massive six-wheeled cargo bikes in the bike lane if you're sharing it with them. But the trade-off is that you're less likely to get hit by a box truck because these are going to help replace a lot of those larger vehicles that also I think are often double parked in bike lanes. So if you're going to have a truck in your bike lane, at least it's one that weighs 300 kilos instead of 5,000 kilos.
Yeah, I don't know that this would, I don't think these things go fast enough to like do any real damage to anybody. European bike lane rules mean it's like what, 15 kilometers per hour.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's good. Also, taking bigger vehicles off the road, that's also good. Theoretically, this probably isn't always going to be stuck in a bike lane. Like I see lots of pictures of this thing just on the side of the street. Much better than a truck. Like you can easily get around it. A lot of advantages to this kind of thing. So I don't know. I'm obviously for stuff like this, ideas like this. I do think though that some bikers are going to be like, guys, come on, like this is getting a little silly right now. But
Yeah.
you know, I think these are great for streets. I think they're great for city centers, and obviously they're going to take off at some point here. So cool.
Yeah, I think especially those like European cities with the not narrow winding alleys, like
Right.
that's the way to
Built
go.
before cars. Yeah, agree. All right, moving on. Will Biden's new 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles affect e-bikes?
So yeah, we just learned a few days ago that the Biden administration is imposing a number of new tariffs on Chinese products, and the electric vehicle category is getting 100% tariff increased from 25%. And so immediately, a lot of people started asking me, is this going to affect electric bicycles? And unfortunately, the answer is we just don't know yet. It's not clear exactly what vehicles are included. Obviously, you're not going to be buying like a BYD or a Neo or, an electric car from China anytime soon. That's what these tariffs are designed to protect against, so that all of these low cost electric cars from China aren't going to be directly competing with our kind of laggard electric vehicle makers here in the US, or I guess legacy automakers, I should say. But the question is, how broad of a brush are they going to paint this electric vehicle category? And what it's really going to come down to is I think they're called the HTS codes that all international imports and exports are classified by. And it's kind of like taxonomy, where like each category is broken into subcategories and subcategories and subcategories. So depending how high up they go, are electric trucks and then electric golf carts and then electric bikes and motorcycles, are these things going to be part of the larger electric vehicle category, or will they only apply these electric vehicle tariffs further down the taxonomy, targeting more of the electric passenger car area? The press release that the White House sent out was not very clear at all. It just says electric vehicles. I reached out to my own customs broker, who I do all sorts of imports with, and he was like, "Yeah, no one knows anything yet. Like, hopefully, in the next few weeks, they'll tell us exactly what categories these tariffs actually apply to." But until then, unfortunately, we just don't know. It does appear that the tariff exemptions that e-bikes have had will likely expire later this month, and
Hmm.
so they'll likely be back under that 25% tariff that was originally imposed under the Trump administration, and then has continued under the Biden administration. Every time that it comes up for renewal, so far they've been renewed, though often with a gap in between the renewal for the exemption. So it could be that they get another exemption again, but for now it's looking like that will likely expire in the end of this month. So we're still probably going to be looking at a 25% tariff on e-bikes, and now we just have to wait and see how heavy-handed the administration gets with this electric vehicle category to know if e-bikes and e-motorcycles will be included for the 100% tariff.
Yeah, that would be a big deal if that happened. I guess it depends on how optimistic the Biden administration is about the domestic or international e-bike market. Like, do we plan to build e-bikes in the U.S.? Like, we don't really have much of a supply chain at this point, right? So, is that
Yeah,
something that they want to build, or is I think if they're being realistic, they would say, look, we don't have that supply chain here. Probably don't need to compete on this too much. But you never know. I mean, this could be something that the U.S. might be trying to build internally. And we've talked to a couple domestic um, uh, e-bike manufacturers. Our friend Chris from Propel e-bikes is doing a domestic e-bike kind of startup called Bloom. Do you remember that?
yeah, I've heard about it.
So there are some, and what e-bike company in California.
Yeah, electric bike company. There's a company in Florida called LEV, I think, used to be Pedego Tech, that has local manufacturing. So there does exist a very small amount of e-bike manufacturing in the US.
Yeah, and we should probably note that like most of the parts that they put together are come from China or those places. So it's not a perfect world, but if the Biden administration wants to kind of jumpstart a e-bike domestic e-bike production, then they may, you know, may try 100% tariff, which would be pretty bad in the short term because nobody's building bikes here right now, or there's very few bikes being built here right now, and doubling the cost of e-bikes would be kind of catastrophic, I think.
Yeah, I mean that I think that would just crater the market because we're already in a bit of a depressed e-bike market as it is.
Hmm.
When the 25% tariffs came in, I mean that was a great example, or sort of a historical precedent to look at, because that was sort of like okay, like most of the categories of stuff coming from China gets flat 25%, and then it took a long time to sort of carve out these exemptions.
Yeah.
So, and in that case, a lot of the companies basically said, like, all right, we're going to do our best to sort of eat this, or there were very slight price increases, $100 or so, with them probably eating the majority of the increase. But they're not going to be able to do that with doubling their own costs.
Right. Yeah. And I think a few companies kind of moved their production to Vietnam or some other places just to get around this. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm kind of in favor of keeping, or pushing it down the road a little bit. Like if you do want to start a domestic e-bike market, you got to have more of a lead time to, like say, all right, we're going to, tax 25%, but it's not going to start for 2 years, or we're going to tax at 100% and it's not going to start for 3 years, or something like that, so that
Yeah.
you can ramp up production outside of China before these huge price spikes hit.
Right. Or give incentives for local companies to begin production. Like you
Right.
can, instead of like penalizing one, you could incentivize the other. I mean, at the end of the day, like for example, and I don't want to get too into, politics here either way, but just, trying to address it objectively. When the Biden administration announced these tariffs, they basically said that it was because the Chinese government sort of puts their finger on the scale and helps their local auto industry be able to reach these prices. But I mean, how many times has the U.S. government bailed out the U.S. auto industry, or how much money and grants did Tesla get? Right? Like, it's not like we're not doing something similar here, right?
Right. Exactly. So let's move on to our sponsor this week. Today's episode is sponsored by Momentum, a new brand of lifestyle e-bikes from Giant Group, designed to deliver a full range of innovative electric, hybrid, and city bikes with premium features, long assist ranges, and sensor technologies that offer natural riding experiences that are both energy saving and fun. From best in class technology to everyday comfort and that extra something something that will turn heads, the team at Momentum has designed a growing selection of two-wheel rides and accessories inspired by you. Whether it's a leisurely ride on a new Vita E Plus low step, throttling up to the new Ceto E Plus, or loading up the Pack Yak E Plus cargo bike, like that name, Pack Yak, uh, for a day with the family, Momentum has an e-bike and accessories to fit your lifestyle. Since Momentum is a bicycling brand under the Giant Group, customers can take advantage of access, support, and service from over 1,200 brick and mortar Giant dealers in the US alone. Perfect for easy maintenance to keep your e-bike in tip-top form. Learn more at momentum-biking.com. That's momentum-biking.com. And that's also in the show notes. Thank you to Momentum for sponsoring this week's podcast. Let's take a quick look at what we got here. So they basically in the US have three bikes. The utility bike, I think, is probably going to be the most popular. They have the Ceto E Plus and the Pack Yak, both good looking bikes, reasonable prices. That's kind of like, I think the behind Momentum is like, we're Giant. We build like bike store bikes, but um, we're gonna make them a little bit less expensive, maybe a little bit, lower quality components, but you still get that um, the bike store idea. You get the support from the bike store. So
Absolutely.
um, yeah, and I forget. I feel like we were gonna review one of these. I think the utility bike or something at some point.
Yeah, I think if it hasn't been posted yet, I think Steven did, or maybe someone did. I think the Pack Yak. Maybe it was Jordan.
Okay. Cool. Well, we'll look forward to more from Momentum soon. Thank you again for sponsoring the show. Moving on. I visited Ride1Up's e-bike factory to find the secret behind good quality, low-cost e-bikes.
This was such a cool experience. I definitely recommend that everyone go check out the video from this one because it really gives you a behind the scenes look of how these very popular e-bikes in the US are made. This one is
If you know
specifically
much
visiting Ride1Up's factory. But if you're not familiar with them, they're very much representative of the like high value electric bikes in the US that are, they're made by US companies that use manufacturing in China. So here I had the chance to not only go see their factory, but visit with the company's founder here, Kevin Duggar. And together we went all through the assembly line, went through like all the different stages of quality assurance, which that itself was an eye-opening experience, and all the way up through packaging to see how they have all these steps along the way to make sure that these bikes are not only built well, but then arrive in good condition. And I can sort of give you a run through of the process here, where basically everything starts locally here. So they've got all their components that go through initial pre-inspection. They build their wheels there. They inspect the frames bare before they even get built up. And so I saw while they were going through frame inspection that there were a couple of frames that had like nicks in the paint. And so they actually mark those and they put like a sticker on them where any like blemishes are so that those can go be remediated before they get built up and sent to customers. And then the assembly process, if you've ever seen, a typical like assembly line, that's basically the process here. So these bikes get loaded up on these assembly lines and they just sort of work their way down, getting all the parts installed, the wheels, the motors, the controllers, all of that stuff. But the cool thing is as they go, they're getting scanned for each component. So when they put the motor in, it gets scanned. When they put the controller in, it gets scanned. They all have these, unique barcodes or serial codes, and that way, if there's ever an issue in the future, everything is accountable. So, like, if a few months from now, the controller supplier tells Ride1Up, like, "Hey, we had a batch of where like 20 of the controllers are missing a component, or like, they're going to die early," then Ride1Up can know which bike it went into, and they can know like which owner it got sent to, and they can be proactive with that kind of stuff. So it's really cool to see that like intelligent inventory system there, so that it's not just a mystery like, oh well, shoot, which which bike got one of those 30 batteries that wasn't good. So that's really neat as well. Here they've got their carbon fiber line for their CF racer bikes, and what was interesting here is that they only let the most experienced technicians in the manufacturer in the factory work on these because you got to be a lot more careful with those carbon fiber frames.
Yeah, the frames are
And
delicate. Can
yeah, and they
smash
also
like
don't
glass.
have any they don't have any power tools on this line either. Everything is done with hand tools to,
Interesting.
be better protective of those carbon fiber frames. And so, the same process as we're looking at with the Portola folding bike there, everything's installed going down the line. But then even after everything's built up, there's like three different levels of testing. There's the first ride testing to make sure it rides well. And then it goes through a set of inspectors that are part of like the factory team, and they go through and they check everything, and it's also traced back to who built it. So if they discover that someone didn't install something correctly and it becomes like a pattern, then that person gets their bonus docked. So if you're
Hmm.
really good and you don't have any mistakes or anything, then you get a higher bonus at the end of the month for the factory employees there. And here we're seeing this was actually the folding handle. I was watching as they were inspecting, and this guy marked it. So I asked what happened, and he explained that the folding handle was too tight on that one, so it's like really hard to open and close. It takes like a lot of hand strength. So that got marked as an error, and it goes off to get remediated before that bike would get packaged up. But then here you're saying this is a third level of inspection, and these guys aren't part of the factory. They're a third party team that Ride1Up uses to come behind the factory quality assurance team and basically run through all the checks again, but using their own method. So they sort of attack it from a different angle, and they would catch anything that might have gotten missed through all those previous quality checks. So it's really cool to see that, like, during the process, everything's being tracked. Afterwards, it's inspected, and then it's inspected by a third party a third time. So, like multiple layers of redundancy here. And what the founder was explaining to me was that for a direct to consumer company, like that's the only way they can do it. They can't have someone getting a bike and something's wrong because it's not a bike shop. It's not like, if a bike shop opens a bike and there's something, there's an issue, then there's a trained tech that's the one building it. For someone getting this at home, it has to work perfectly right out of the box because most people getting a direct to consumer bike are not trained bike technicians. And then lastly, here we get to see how these bikes all get packaged up for delivery. And what Kevin was explaining to me was that they've tried to take every bit of plastic they can out of the packaging and make it as recyclable as possible. The one thing that I thought was interesting was he explained that, you know, if you look at recycling in the US, it's really not all it's sort of cracked up to be in many places. And so even if not everyone's recycling all these components, it's all biodegradable. The only thing that's plastic in there are the cable ties. And what he said is they're going to be switching soon to reusable cable ties
Hmm.
where they have that little extra like tooth thing so you can push it down and, you know, once you take it off, you've got like a reusable cable tie you can use for your own projects. So I
Oh,
thought that
cool.
was pretty neat as well.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's great to
So
see. It's great to
sorry, go
see
on.
what goes on behind the scenes there. Because we just get these boxes with bikes, and I kind of wonder like, how did this get here? How did how did it cost that much money? Who's wrapping this thing up, and um, like, do they make like, it's crazy that they make the wheels in the same place that they're putting together the bikes. It seems like kind of like vertically integrated, more than I would expect. I just kind of imagine like there's a wheel maker in China and they make all the wheels, and there's a frame maker and they make all the frames. But it seems like these are a little bit more bespoke. But it's also impressive because Ride1Ups uh, are always like the highest components for the lowest price. So it does kind of make sense. This is how they do those kind of impressive things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, having as much in-house as possible just gives them more control as well. Like with that automatic wheel building machine, they were showing me how, like, even once it comes through, like theoretically the robot should be pretty perfect at building these, but wheel building is kind of an art still. And so every now
Hmm.
and again a wheel will go through the machine and it's not like perfectly true. And the machine actually checks for that. And if it doesn't get it perfectly true, it spits it out a different chute, and so a human then comes along and can like inspect it and figure out, you know, what needs to be done, because people who actually do wheel building by hand, the good ones are like, you know, masters at this. It's really like, you know, almost an art. And so having that capability in your own factory means that, you know, you're not going to get sent the few like wobbly wheels that, you know, a wheel builder that pumps out, you know, 100,000 of these a day is going to let pass through.
Right. Yeah, it's impressive all around, and props to Ride1Up for building a solid you know supply chain. I do also like the controllers are potted so that they're waterproof pretty much, and you don't have to worry about shorts there either. We talk about the batteries a lot because the thermal runway. These would probably just short and just stop working, but it is good to see that they're thinking about that kind of stuff in the controllers as well. So shout out to Ride1Up. Nice work.
Absolutely.
All right, my turn. Pedego Moto puts the fun in functional transportation. So I got a chance over the last month, really, to try out the Pedego Moto, which is one of the three new bikes that they announced last month. Or is it? Yeah, it was last month. They announced this cargo bike here, the Moto. This one is in black, and then what do you call it? Tricycle. So what do they call this one? The trike. Yeah. So um, my favorite of those three would probably be the Moto, and obviously, it looks a little bit like the one of our favorite bikes, the Juice Scorpion, but I'm here to tell you it's a totally different experience. It is a much bigger bike. It comes standard with foot pegs. You can see there. It has just better components up and down. It's got a turn signal. It's got those tires are just monster tires. Like, riding through on gravel, these things just like they eat up potholes. They, with the suspension as well. The battery's close to a kilowatt hour. So, they say 75 miles, and I think that's probably a little optimistic. Typical for something like this. You're probably going to get 40, 50 miles if you're going mildly fast and you're pedaling. And that's, realistically, like how many people are riding 50 miles a day on their e-bike. Obviously, if you live in an apartment and you have to carry the battery up, it's kind of nice to not have to do that, too many times per week. So battery's great. And like the other thing is like, you know, this was kind of drop shipped to me, and it came in a box, a big box, a tall box, kind of like what we saw at Upway. And that tall box, like the whole bike was basically put together in it. The only thing you have to do is tighten the. You can see from this. This is how it came out of the box. Basically, all I had to do is straighten the handlebars and tighten them, 2 screws, and then take off the plastic wrap and screw on the pedals, and that's it. Like it's ready to go. Battery's charged. Battery's in the slot. Like I was, 5 minutes from opening the box to I'm riding the bike, which is not very common right now. So I'm not sure if Pedego is doing this with all their bikes, or maybe I got a special situation because I was early and um, all that. And I really love that blue color, by the way. Um,
Definitely.
what's that?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it looks so much better than the black, in my opinion. It gives it more character.
Yeah, the black one I think is, it's more subtle. Like you're kind of just you're hiding, you're just there, but the blue one is super cool. And here's an example of like how much bigger this thing is than the Scorpion. I mean, you can tell like, it's like double the seat. Like tires are way bigger. The Scorpion's tires, like, in my review of that, I was like, yeah, I don't know if they really did a lot of upgrades here. It felt like a lot of downgrades in terms of quality components. And then of course, Pedego's, kind of hitting all the right numbers in the components compartment. Color screen, turn signals, lights. The front light is really bright. Brake lights. It's just a different experience. Like it's just a much better built bike. Um, the downside is like Pedego follows all laws, so it comes as a class 2 e-bike. So it will stop accelerating at 20 miles per hour. There is a class 3 update you can do, and that came after I got the bike, but pretty simple. And so then it doesn't throttle past 20 miles per hour, but if you're pedaling, it'll go up to 30, or it'll go up to 28 miles per hour, which means class 3. So they really kind of take law seriously. Pedago's, got the brick and mortar stores. They're in the communities. They're represented there. And that's another great thing about Pedego. Like I think about like how most people get their first e-bike experience, and with Pedego, um, they're out in neighborhoods. They're in Miami. They're in in New York, wherever people are e-biking. They're there, and they're renting bikes, or you can try out bikes. So that all that's to say, this bike is not cheap. It's $4,000 basically, which obviously the bargain basement fly by night drop ship companies are selling similar bikes. I wouldn't say similar, but like uh, different bikes for about half that price, which is like, okay, that's you're not getting the quality, you're not getting the the store standing behind you, you're not getting like every component is really well done. Safety is paramount here. They've got the bigger 210 millimeter disc brakes and everything. So I don't know. I just there's a market for people who want the best bike, and to have a bike shop nearby that's standing behind the bike, and the stores are actually pretty cool. Like you go in, they have accessories for every kind of bike. You can get any kind of bike, even non e-bikes, fixed there. So it's just like it's good to be in the neighborhood. It's good to have those around.
Yeah, absolutely. So my biggest question is about the suspension. How does it feel? Lots of times these dual coilover shocks, they're more appearance than function, but at this price, hopefully it feels pretty good.
Yeah, it felt great actually. I can't really tell if it's like those huge tires or the suspension that's giving it, and it's probably a combination. But the ride is just so smooth. I think I'm messing around with the suspension at some point on the video, but I'm just scrolling around here.
Was it adjustable in the rear?
No, it's not, but it uh, you can tell there's like some really,
Oh yeah.
and you know the other you know we've tried other bikes and it's not quite as flexible. So I mean, you have you know the ability to put two people on this bike, and it still rides really great. You know, I had my son on there on the back, and he was just chilling. Like it's a big seat. It's a big bike. It's ready for you know lots of stuff. So
Yeah. And do you have to add those foot pegs as like an accessory, or they're just part of the bike that
it
come?
came with the bike, man. It's like you don't even have to put them on. Like they're it's just in the box.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things, like, granted, this definitely is an expensive bike, like, I'm not gonna say it's not, but a lot of other companies, they hold back the foot pegs, that's another $60, the passenger seat's $120, all these, like, nickel and dime things or
Hmm.
Benjamin things, but here, it's great to see that, they just put it all in there, so you're paying a lot, but you're also getting a lot.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the feeling I was getting. You know, I rode this on gravel and I rode it on streets and everywhere in between, and it just like the ride is just so smooth. Like it's just it feels like um you can just go and you don't have to think about like, oh, is this thing gonna fall apart or is this thing, you know, are these tires gonna handle this stuff? Um and you know, even on gravel, I felt like I could go for, you know, 30, 40 miles even, you know, at full throttle. So, you know, hats off to Pedego, great bike.
Yeah, that's great to see. It's good to see good options like that people can actually go and, like, get at their local store kinda thing.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Failed Saunders Metacycle motorcycle was never street legal, reveals employee. Whoops.
Yeah, this is wild. So I'll try and do like the recap in 15 seconds here. Saunders Metacycle unveiled like 3 years ago, $5,000 for an 80 mile an hour, 80-mile range electric motorcycle, sent shockwaves through the industry, but then it had a roller coaster path through development, production, and delivery, where they only ended up delivering about 14 or 1,500 of these things before the company basically went broke and most recently went into receivership and does not appear to have survived. So, there's a lot more to that story that you can go back and watch several other of our podcasts to get into what went wrong. But the interesting thing now is that, months and months after the company's fallen apart, one of the former employees has come forward and said, and he was part of the like prototyping and engineering team. So, he's not just like a, sales guy or customer service. Like he was
Right.
part of building these products. And he says like there were a lot of institutional problems with this, not the least of which is that the bike was never technically street legal. And he listed a few things. It seems like there were many, but one of the biggest is that the brakes were never actually homologated for what would be required for motorcycle brakes. That they would have been fine on an e-bike or an e-scooter or something like that, but not for a motor vehicle motorcycle. That they didn't meet the federal motor vehicle safety standards, and so this really was never a street legal motorcycle to begin with. Now there were plenty of people who registered them at their local DMV, and that is kind of a hit or a miss process. In the US, there's no type testing like in Europe, where an independent body certifies that a vehicle is street legal. In the US, it's self certification. So all Saunders had to do was say like, yes, I swear we meet the the minimum requirements, and then it's basically up to the company to defend that if that's ever called into question. So several people were able to register these at a DMV, where all it takes is basically providing the VIN number. Several other people had problems. I know in some states it was nearly impossible to register these, but technically speaking, any of these vehicles that are out on the road now don't actually meet the federal motor vehicle safety standards, and may potentially have an issue if anything from if you're pulled over on the side of the road and you could be cited for driving a non-street legal vehicle, to potential liability in the future. And I'm not sure of any remediation kit or process that will be available. The company seems to have largely disappeared. I did reach out to to Storm Saunders, the company's founder, to hopefully get a comment on the story. He did not respond, and so it doesn't appear that there's anyone, that can sort of handle this. Now, the employee that did speak out about this, Bill Rule is his name. He is now doing consulting and basically offering for owners of metacycles to help them with issues and problems. He's probably the most knowledgeable person out there right now about metacycles. And so he has lots of people talking to him about different failures they've had, controllers that have failed, that sort of thing. And he seems to have some sort of relationship with the original factory because he is sometimes able to provide spare parts. And it sounds like he's trying to get a hold of a lot of the spare parts that are sitting in China that were never paid for, so that he can basically provide these as a service to metacycle owners into the future. So hopefully he's able to sort of help owners and keep bikes rolling, and potentially even come up with a fix for this, because if the company was still in existence, this would almost certainly be a recall scenario where they'd need to replace these brakes, let alone anything else that wasn't originally street legal. There were a number of other things that I noted in the first article we ever wrote about this during the unveil, that, I saw several things that weren't street legal at the time. Those were mostly taken care of, but I wasn't aware of the brake issue. And that one seems to be one of the most glaring issues.
Yeah, I mean, man, it's kind of sad. As Michael Sprinzella says, it was a Saunders that inspired my first DIY e-bike in 2017. It's kind of a shame to see like how far the company's fallen. I mean, I guess it's all the way down now. Like it's already fallen, and like now it's like, the legacy of the company is kind of up in the air, and obviously Storm Saunders is missing in action and not poking his head out anymore. But it's just a shame because like Saunders, like that $500 fat tire e-bike was one of the big movers of e-bikes into the US market basically like a decade ago. So, like he was obviously, focused on cool stuff. Like the Metacycle was super cool. It got a lot of attention. But now it's like, oh, the whole thing was a scam, and all this other stuff, and it's kind of a bad mark on e-bike history, that this company that inspired a lot of people and kind of jump started the e-bike industry in the U.S. is now kind of a bad mark on the industry.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. And I mean, I think a lot of people have a lot of opinions about Storm, but this guy Bill definitely, laid the blame at his feet, saying that that it sort of stunk from the top of the company, and that's what led to this. So I'm sure there's a lot of people that have a lot of insight that were once employees of the company, that hopefully this comes out, because there are a lot of unanswered questions. And there are also a lot of people that still, have not gotten their metacycles. I'm not sure exactly how many, but I think it's probably still in the thousands. It's not a few hundred people kind of thing that have either paid in full or paid, several payments towards the reservation deposit. So there's unfortunately a lot to this saga that is yet to be fully sussed out. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not even over yet, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Our last story of the week, or the fortnight, is EV maker Eli launches its $11,900 electric microcar in the U.S.
I am so gung ho about this thing. Like, this thing just checks all my boxes for if I wanted an enclosed 4-wheel vehicle. The Eli Zero is a what many people would call a neighborhood electric vehicle. That's sort of a general term. It's not a legal classification in the U.S., unfortunately. So the legal classification is a low speed vehicle in the U.S., and that means that it meets like a dozen or so federal regulations, and that it doesn't go more than 25 miles per hour. So presumably goes like 24.9 miles an hour. But on the inside, it very much looks like a car, albeit a very small car. It's got power steering. It's got sort of normal looking bucket seats. It's got a nice color display. You can upgrade it with like the Sony, whatever car screen is the newest system that Sony puts out for the infotainment. Apple AirPlay or CarPlay, Android Auto, like, it's sunroof, optional air conditioning. It's got a lot of car like features to it. It's just much smaller. So, it can park perpendicularly to the curb instead of parallel parking. I think it's shorter than the new electric Hummer is wide for comparison. It's obviously a two-seater. This is not a four-seater, so it's not meant for a family. Though to be honest, I think it could be a good second car for some people if you're not always needing to fit a whole family of people in here. It's not like you're always taking all your kids to hockey practice or whatever. But certainly for couples or for singles living in a city, this would be a cool way to have a car like vehicle, be enclosed, not rained on, have air conditioning, that sort of thing, have marginally more safety than a bike. It doesn't have airbags. It doesn't have, the same crash test rating that real cars have. But at the same time, it's designed for roads where you're just not going that fast. Like it only goes 25. Legally, you're not even allowed to operate it on roads over 35. So anyone who owns this is going to be choosing where they drive it wisely. And even though it's not going to fit some people, I do think it would fit many people's lifestyle that live in urban areas. So to me, this thing is awesome, and the fact that it's coming to the U.S. now is just the icing on the cake. I tested this a few times in Europe. It's really fun to drive. It feels like a car on the inside, just one that's super nimble. And if anything, I would say it feels a lot bigger than it is because of those glass doors. It just like you don't get the claustrophobic feeling because you can see like basically all through the door. I was testing it with the company's founder, Marcus Lee, and what he was telling me is he would get a lot of people in there that would say like, "Wow, this feels bigger than my smart car." And he was like, "Yeah, it's definitely not, but it feels that way because of the glass doors, and you just don't feel like you're cramped in there." So $12,000, that puts it at less than a lot of electric motorcycles out there, and this is something that like whoever's riding with you doesn't have to like hang on to your back kind of thing. They can sit comfortably next to you in a chair with a seatbelt. So
Yeah,
I'm
and you don't have to
pretty
worry about
excited.
rain and all the other stuff too.
Exactly. Like it solves a lot of problems that people who would say like, yeah, I'd like to ride an e-bike or like any motorcycle could be nice, but it's not for me. Like this solves a lot of those problems.
Yeah, and I can envision this being anywhere basically that people ride around in golf carts, which are like beach communities, senior living places, um, you know, even in cities and just suburban neighborhoods that you don't need a car for. Now, I know a lot of these NEVs type things are legal for people who don't have a driver's license. You do need a driver's license to operate one of these in the U.S., right?
It depends on the state, but I'm
Oh,
pretty
okay.
sure most, if not all, probably require it.
So you couldn't give this to your like 14-year-old and say, "Hey, go to the store and get me some food."
Probably not,
Okay,
though. In France, they're big with 14-year-olds because I think with a moped license that you can get at 14, you can drive quadricycles like these.
nice. Well, that would also make it very popular in the U.S. I think if they could, lower the driving age on these things a little bit. I know my kids would love to have a vehicle to operate, although the bikes that they have are quite good as well. All right, let's move on to the comment section here. So I will close this out and let's see what we got. Stay connected with EVs. Great podcast as always. By the way, if you have a few minutes right now and you want to ask a question or have a comment, throw it in the comment section and we'll try to answer it right away. Moving on to Tyler Hillyard. Imagine if there was an exception for bikes, motorcycles, then China came out with a cheap Aptera, technically a motorcycle, and that is what got people to downsize their vehicles for once. That is an interesting idea. Like, obviously, China could probably make an Aptera that costs way less than I think they're selling for like $25,000, $30,000, those Apteras. Um, and it's officially, a motorcycle in most places. In fact, in some states, I believe you need to wear a helmet in the Aptera, which is, you know, kind of interesting situation, because it's a three-wheeled vehicle, and they're basically getting by uh, the motor, the traffic laws by saying, hey, it's just a motorcycle, and their motorcycles are inherently unsafe, so don't worry about safety testing this thing. Um, but yeah, I mean, China's not just good at making cheap vehicles; they're good at what I call fast following, which the Biden administration might call copying IP. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see like a Chinese Aptera that costs half as much and actually was produced. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
So that would be incredible to have that as an option. I mean, for one, I'd feel a little bit bad for the Aptera guys because I know they've had quite a saga to get to where they are now.
Hmm.
But the other thing is, so you're definitely right, I would say, about the fast following idea. But to me, I see a lot of these cases as where they're able to leverage stuff that they build or use for their domestic market to be able to reach the scale and the speed of getting some of that stuff that we get to appreciate. And so for something like an Aptera knockoff, unless it could use a lot of like domestic parts or there was a market for that in China as well, I can't imagine it being a very lucrative product for them to try and knock off.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. Michael Sprinzelis. I'm late. You probably passed this battery topic. I heard the U.S. is considering laws like New York City on e-bikes. Well, we talked about China, but we didn't really talk about the U.S.
Yeah, so there's definitely rumblings of potential federal regulation of e-bikes beyond, the very minimal regulation that exists. Most regulation is done at the state level and some even at the city level, like NYC requiring UL listed e-bikes, I think, or at least UL listed batteries. I think San Francisco, if I'm not mistaken, might be requiring, or maybe it was San Diego requiring UL listing for the entire bike that it's being like kicked around in their local ordinances. And so I don't think that's a done deal yet, but it's certainly becoming more common, these regulations. I don't think the US has got anything at the federal level that's, close to implementation yet. I'm not even sure it would come this year, but it very well could be, down the road and not terribly far down the road.
Yeah, and he follows up saying he heard about federal laws. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. I mean, obviously, it's a big concern for a lot of people and government. Then you put on the China situation as well, so that's obviously a concern. So uh, and even in other fields, our kind of paranoia about China is, like obviously with drones, for instance, DJI is always worried about if they're going to get blockaded. So it's interesting. Electronics in China and the U.S. right now are all just kind of a big mess. Let's move on. Stay connected with EVs. Kevin is a great CEO. That's Ride1Up's CEO, right? With
Yes.
amazing eye for quality.
Yeah. Technically, he's not the CEO. He's there's another CEO. I'm not sure what his actual position is. He's the founder, and then he's got some other title. But yeah, I mean, he comes from like a Dutch background. I think his one of his parents is Dutch, and so like he gets bikes. Like
Mhm.
inherently, it's like in his DNA, and so he brings that perspective, and I think that's really cool for like an American with Dutch background to take on that kind of problem and tackle it the way he did is really cool.
Yeah. So yeah, we talked about how Saunders inspired DIY e-bikes. Yeah, it's just a shame that now the Saunders name is kind of tainted, because they
Yeah.
were inspirations and a lot of people's first e-bikes, and maybe they just saw Saunders and they're like, holy crap, this fat tire e-bike's like flying down the beach, and they were like $500. And he continues. Saunders always made cool looking stuff, but the components were lagging. Yeah, I mean, I actually had a couple. I still have a Saunders fat tire e-bike that was, like you said, not amazing component quality, but like for the price, it was like probably the best I was going to get. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on the legacy of Saunders there?
Yeah, I mean, their MO was always like, overpromise, underdeliver.
Yep.
But they put a lot of bikes on the road. I think the minimum estimate is like 50,000 and potentially significantly more than that. So, they were never the highest quality, but they also weren't, like these no-name Amazon companies either. They were a value brand.
Right. Yeah, and they got the word out. They were important. Um,
Absolutely.
moving moving on. Congratulations on 2,000K subs. I didn't realize, but that's great news.
Yeah, not only did the channel, I think either this morning or last night hit 200,000, but I think it was your Pedego video that put us over the edge.
Yeah. All right. Cool. David Hodgson, the best e-bike you get is the one that you build yourself, and that's from David in Thailand. Uh, I would say that is not true because the bike I built myself was very weird, and it didn't hold up so well. So I think maybe for some people that might be true, but for a lot of us, the best e-bike you get is probably some experts built.
Yeah, I mean, to each their own.
Sure.
Yeah, it is often good to let the professionals handle things. Like, there are a lot of great e-bikes I've ridden that I could not make, but I think that if you are a DIY person and you've got a lot of, hands-on experience with electronics and that sort of thing, you can definitely get the most appropriate bike for you by sort of piecing together exactly what you want.
All right, last things on Saunders for the price, and at that time, the Saunders Fatty was cool. Yeah, I mean they were selling them for like $500. I think there's like $200 shipping fees. So you're talking about $700 for a fat tire e-bike back in 2000, early or mid 2000 teens or whatever. They were cool, and he's still riding it from 2017. So pretty sweet.
Yeah, they'll be out there. All right. I think that's all of the comments. So thank you everybody for tuning in. It was great having you, and we'll see you guys back here in another 2 weeks for the next episode of the Wheelie Podcast. See you.